European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated that Russia is preparing for a future confrontation with European democracies. She emphasized during her speech at the Royal Danish Military Academy in Copenhagen, as reported by Reuters, that while the United States shifts its focus to the Indo-Pacific region, Russia is gearing up for conflict with Europe. Russia has massively expanded its military-industrial production capacity. This investment fuels its war of aggression in Ukraine while preparing it for future confrontation with European democracies, the President of the European Commission highlighted. In this situation, Europe wants to stop Putin in Ukraine. For this, it is expected that the army will be deployed to Ukraine. Former spokesman for the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Vladislav Seleznev, explained why the head of the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin, does not want to see foreign military contingents in Ukraine during a possible ceasefire. He said this on Kiev 24, commenting on the Russian side's statement on its agreement to a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine in the form of exclusively civilian, unarmed observers. As a representative of the headquarters of the anti-terrorist operation, I can talk a lot about the activities of the OSCE observation missions, those same unarmed international observers who are supposed to monitor the ceasefire. Let me remind you that during the anti-terrorist operation and the Joint Forces operation, 25 ceasefires were applied, which the Russian side violated each time. Often, not even 2 hours had passed after the conclusion of the relevant agreements, and the enemy violated these very agreements, Seleznev noted. He noted that the only argument that Vladimir Putin will respond to is the argument of force. The OSCE projects any other monitoring missions, according to Seleznev, will not be an effective factor that will ensure stable and unconditional peace as well as calm on the line of combat contact. I think it is not for nothing that the Russians are so nervous about the fact that French and British officials are ready to ensure the functioning of the armed monitoring mission. And I have seen statements from some senior officials in the Russian Federation saying that these peacekeepers will become legitimate targets for the Russian occupiers. Putin wants to get rid of unnecessary witnesses to the criminal actions that Russian occupiers are actually committing on Ukrainian soil every day, every minute. And not only Ukrainian. In principle, what Ukraine did with the Russian city of Sudza is a fairly eloquent action, the military analyst explained. As is known, Britain and France have said they are ready to send peacekeeping forces to monitor any ceasefire in Ukraine. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said his country is also open to requests.
President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed during a lengthy call Tuesday to an immediate pause in strikes against energy. According to Associated Press, infrastructure in the Ukraine war, but the Russian leader stopped short of backing a broader 30-day pause in fighting that the U.S. administration is pressing for. The White House described it as the first step in a movement to peace that it hopes will include a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea and eventually a full and lasting end to the fighting. But there was no indication that Putin has backed away from his conditions for a prospective peace deal, which are fiercely opposed by Kiev. And shortly after the call ended, air raid alerts sounded in Kyiv, followed by explosions in the city. Local officials urged people to seek shelter. Putin during the call reiterated his demand for an end to foreign military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine, according to the Kremlin. Trump, though, denied that the subject came up during an interview with Fox News on Tuesday. "We didn't talk about aid," Trump said. "We didn't talk about aid at all." Trump on Tuesday again underscored his view that Ukraine is not in a strong negotiating position. He said Russian forces have surrounded Ukrainian troops in Russia's Kursk region, amplifying an assertion made by Russian officials that's been disputed by Zelenski. "They are nicely encircled, and that's not good," said Trump, according to excerpts of an interview on Fox News Channel's Ingram Angle. "And we want to get it over with."
Russia has the advantage, as you know. They have encircled about 2,500 soldiers. They're nicely encircled, and that's not good. And we want to get it over with. Look, we're doing this. There are no Americans involved. There could be if you end up in World War III over this, which is so ridiculous. But, you know, strange things happen. And I think we had a great call. It lasted almost 2 hours. Talked about a lot of things and toward getting it to peace. And we talked about other things also.
Was there non-negotiables mentioned by Putin? It was reported that I think the Kremlin media actually stated that he demanded an immediate cessation of aid to Ukraine in order to get to this multi-step deal.
No, he didn't. We didn't talk about aid. Actually, we didn't talk about aid at all. We talked about a lot of things, but aid was never discussed.
The White House says President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed on an immediate ceasefire for energy and infrastructure targets in the Russia-Ukraine war. According to Associated Press, the White House described the move Tuesday as the first step in a movement to peace that it hopes will eventually include a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea and a full and lasting end to the fighting. Ukraine hasn't responded yet. Associated Press reporter Zeke Miller says Trump and Putin held a call for more than an hour on Tuesday, working out a three-step plan. The real test is going to be, does this sort of agreement in principle actually materialize? Do both sides cease attacks on energy and infrastructure sites in their respective countries? That will be the first trust-building exercise, so to speak. Of this, can they actually get what is an agreement in principle into something that takes effect on the ground, Miller said. The engagement is just the latest turn in dramatically shifting U.S.-Russia relations as Trump made quickly ending the conflict a top priority, even at the expense of straining ties with longtime American allies who want Putin to pay a price for the invasion.
President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin wrapped up a more than 90-minute phone call where they agreed to begin to seek a limited ceasefire as the first step towards bringing about the end to Russia's more than 3-year invasion of Ukraine. That first step would include a halt on fighting on both sides, attacking on both sides of energy and infrastructure targets, which on both sides have been suffered severe damage over recent years. And then from there, the U.S. planned to extend to targets in the Black Sea as they try to rebuild economic corridors, and then finally a final complete ceasefire to that war. It is unclear yet just the extent to which the Ukrainian government is on board with that plan. They have proposed versions of that, but the devil will obviously be in the details.